All right, so I'm back again for another installation of this little mini series we got going on. I'm basically going over every position on the Detroit Lions and kind of going over who's going to start, who's going to be backups, the depth at that position, some stats from last year, what I project them to get this year, and kind of just a overall deep dive into each position group. So far, I've done the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. Today, I'm going to be going over tight ends. So if you haven't seen the other videos, I suggest you go back and watch them. But it's not necessarily to understand what we're going over this video. Um, so, before we get into it, I would ask you to like the video and subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me for everybody that does so. And I would just really appreciate if you guys would take the 2 seconds out of your day to do that. But with that said, let's get into the tight ends. As I've done for every other installation of this series, I'm going to go from the bottom of the depth chart and work my way up. Kind of end with the starters, end with some of the better stuff that have a little bit more detail on, have a little bit more, interesting things to talk about. So the Lions currently have 4 tight ends on their roster. They have Hunter Bryant, Isaac Nauta, Jesse James, and TJ Hockenson. So I'm going to start with Hunter Bryant and kind of go up. So Hunter Bryant was a undrafted free agent signing, tight end. He was a top tight end prospect in the draft, but he unfortunately did have some injury concerns. So that's unfortunate, but that's why he did drop all the way through the draft. In his final year at Washington, he had 52 receptions for 825 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, he could definitely produce. He can definitely get you yards and touchdowns. He just unfortunately could not stay on the field for the Washington Huskies. Some interesting news. Hunter Bryant was actually the #1 ranked undrafted free agent target after the draft. So he was above names like Thaddeus Moss, who is the kid of Randy Moss, one of the best receivers of all time. J.R. Reed, a very highly regarded safety out of Georgia, and Anthony Gordon, quarterback out of Washington State. So, I mean, that's kind of the company that he's in. He's above all of them, ranked above all of them. So that's a very impressive feat for him. I'm glad the Lions picked him up in undrafted free agency. Tight end wasn't really a move as we kind of bolstered that position last year. But if we can get a guy of his caliber after the draft for a cheap contract, I see no reason why you shouldn't go after it and at least give him a chance, give him an opportunity to compete. And I think that's exactly what he is going to do. I think he's going to come in, he's going to work hard, he's going to compete with Isaac Nauta for that third tight end role. And I think that he can definitely give Isaac Nauta a run for his money for the third tight end. I wouldn't be surprised if he made the 53-man roster when it's all said and done. He's a very talented player, but we'll see if he could stay healthy, and we'll see him in the preseason, see what his role is kind of going to be. And I look forward to watching him. I think that's one of the players that I'm going to be keeping an eye on just because of, I guess I don't want to say the hype because he didn't even get drafted, but almost the hype of, being the #1 player in undrafted free agency coming to Detroit. I kind of want to see what he can do and why he was graded so highly. I'll be excited to watch him. The next tight end we have on the list is Isaac Nauta. Last year, Isaac Nauta was a 7th round pick in last year's draft. So, so not the past draft, but the draft before. Last year with the Lions, he played 2 games. He had 2 receptions for 13 yards. So he didn't really have a huge impact for the Lions. He kind of came in as a depth tight end. He contributed a little bit, obviously, in the last couple of games, but he didn't do a whole lot. He's a very strange tight end. He's definitely more of a receiving tight end, a vertical threat than he is a blocker. He gets a couple nice, he'll make a big catch every once in a while to keep the chains moving, but he's not going to be that premier tight end that we look at, every couple passes just as a big body to go get it. He's kind of that depth tight end that can come in if there's injury, come in if we need a rotational guy, but I don't think that he's going to be I don't think he's going to contribute a lot to the Lions this season. I think we have a lot of good tight ends on the roster, and I don't think that he's going to be able to get on the field very much next season unless there is injuries again, unfortunately. But I don't expect injuries to be as bad as they were last season, because last season that was almost at a ridiculous level, how many players were injured. So next we kind of get on to Jesse James. Jesse James was a free agent that we brought in last year. He played 13 games for the Lions. He had 16 receptions for 142 yards. He did the only play I can really remember, like a big impact play, was they went to him on the third down play against the Chargers to kind of get that first down, and so they could run out the clock, use the Chargers' last time out, and and that's really the only play that I remember, though. He didn't have a touchdown. He didn't end up scoring last season. He only had 160 or 142 yards. I think that he's a good tight end. I just don't think that we've targeted him a lot. We didn't target our tight ends a lot last season. It seemed like we were always looking at the wide receivers, the Kenny Galladay's, the Marvin Joneses, the Marvin Halls, even Danny Amendola. I don't feel like we use the tight end a ton in our offense. At least not as a receiving threat, but and I think that's more what Jesse James is. I think he can block, but I think he's a good receiving tight end too. So I think he's a very good all-around tight end. He just didn't get a lot of targets last season to make a whole lot happen. But I mean, that's just kind of the way it is in our offense. Unfortunately for tight ends, they're not going to get a lot of production, I don't think. And then we move on to our last tight end, the fourth tight end on our roster. That is TJ Hockenson, the 8th overall draft pick from last year's draft. He played in 12 games for the Lions. He had 32 receptions for 367 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he was by far the most productive tight end on the roster. He will probably be tight end 1 as long as he's healthy by week 1. But the stats kind of lie a little bit here. So in week 1, he had an amazing game. He had 6 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown. And then after that, he kind of fell off and only was able to he was only able to get 367 yards total, and 131 of that came in the first week. So he had a very good week 1. I think he took a lot of people by surprise. And then everybody kind of figured out, hey, we really need to guard this guy. If we let him loose, he's going to go for big yardage and touchdowns. So I think he kind of took people by surprise in week 1. I was very surprised in week 1 when he had that big week. I didn't expect him to do that, but he did. And I think that he showed that he has the talent and the ability to do that, but he just didn't really have a lot of opportunity to do so. He was injured for a couple of games. He had a pretty bad concussion against the Chiefs that let him out for a couple of weeks, and he was just not really the same player after that. I think he was doing really well. And then that injury kind of slowed him down, and then he started to get a little better near the end of the season again. So I'm very interested to see where how his stats look next year compared to this year. Hopefully he stays healthy, but I would expect his production to go up. Again, he didn't get targeted that many times. He only had 32 receptions last year, which isn't horrible. I mean, that's a decent amount for a tight end. But I would expect him to maybe get targeted a little bit more in the red zone next season, and then just maybe his stats would probably go up a little bit just if he's healthy, he's out there all the time. So I would expect his stats to go up a little bit. Tight end isn't really the most interesting position, just because a lot of their job is to block for the running back as well as catch, so they're kind of on the offensive line almost a little bit. And Hockenson and Jesse James are definitely in that. They are really good blockers, and I think that we used them more as blockers than receivers last season. And I wouldn't expect that to change. Or at least it seems as though Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn and Darrell Bevell are looking to run the ball more. So I would expect them to do that. I would expect the tight ends to stay in and block a little bit, or not even a little bit, quite often actually. But at the same time, our tight ends really didn't produce anything last year, which is strange because of all the money and draft capital we put into it. But I would expect our production to go up next season. This is kind of a weakness for the Lions, I think, or at least last year it was. I just feel like we didn't have a lot of consistent production out of our tight ends last season. It's more of a quantity over quality situation. I think we have good tight ends, but I don't think we use them enough I don't think we use them enough, and I think that give especially TJ Hockenson more of an opportunity. I think that he's gonna get more stats. I think he's gonna make the most of it, and I think we should definitely get him more involved next season. But that's kind of all I got for today. Kind of a shorter one, just because the tight ends don't get a lot of the stats. The tight ends do a lot of the grinding, and they do a lot of the dirty work on the offensive line with the offensive linemen, who I will be going over tomorrow. But I mean, yeah, it's just not the most exciting position, not the most flashy position, but it really wasn't a good spot for the Lions last season, and I would definitely expect it to improve. So that's all I got really today. If there's more Lions news tonight, or before I get the lineman video out tomorrow, I'll definitely make that video and I'll let you guys know. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow with the offensive lineman video. Thanks, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.